What is happening, boys and girls? Jim here, you know the channel name. Today's little RC project, working on the Huina 1593 excavator. Now I'd like to do three little mods to this excavator today. Number one, I'd like to be able to get this main boom to raise up or rise up a little bit higher. Reasons are obvious. We cannot load up that Huina 1582 tipper truck on flat ground. Excavator needs to be sitting on some kind of a platform in order to load up these vehicles. And that is just not practical. I tell you what, that really pigeonholes you into one thing with the excavators when it comes to loading up the trucks. And most of the time when we're out on the adventure park working on the course, we're digging trenches, we're digging pits, we're cleaning up erosion damage and things of that nature. And when it comes to loading up the trucks, we're loading up the vehicles from the same level of ground. Once again, it's just not practical or feasible to put this excavator on a platform in order to load up the trucks. Most normal full-size excavators, or pretty much all full-size excavators, can reach into the back of a dump truck with absolutely no problem whatsoever. And these little RC ones should be able to do the same thing. Second thing that we want to do is see if we can get a little bit more inward travel out of the secondary boom. So we're going to go in here and see if we can do something about that lower limiter switch, possibly relocate it, maybe grind away some plastic. I don't know what's going to happen with all this nonsense, but I'd like to be able to get that secondary boom to travel inward a little bit further. Third thing that we're going to do, which is the easiest thing out of the bunch, and that is to hot glue in and some odd nuts and bolts and things of that nature into our lower track carriage and body and chassis portion of the excavator. I'd like to get this machine a little bit heavier than what it is. I believe it weighs right around 6 pounds right now from the factory, and I'd like to get this guy a little bit heavier just so that we can compensate for larger buckets and larger buckets full of material. The last time we had this large yellow grading bucket on the 1593, it didn't take much before it was tipping the machine right over. A little bit more than half a bucket, maybe 3/4 of a bucket, and this machine was just tipping right over. Could not handle the weight of the larger bucket. Mental note, my 580 can't handle this bucket either, and that vehicle weighs 14 pounds. So we definitely need to add some weight to this thing in order to compensate for a larger yellow grading bucket such as this. Once again, that is going to be the easiest part of the project, is gluing weight into the track carriage and into the body of the vehicle. All right, so let's get started here. Let's talk about warranties and disclaimers and things of that nature. Depending on where you purchased your vehicle from, you may have a limited warranty with it or some kind of a warranty with it. If you do have a warranty on your vehicle, then I would advise that you don't do a darn thing to it. Just leave it alone, leave it in stock condition until your warranty is up, and then modify it from there. If you do any noticeable changes to the vehicle, the manufacturer is going to say, hey, you messed with the vehicle and that voids your warranty. So don't do anything to your vehicle. Don't add weight to it. Don't put a yellow flashing light on it. Don't put a driver inside the cab. Don't change out your battery connector. Just leave everything as it is in stock form, or else it's most likely going to void your warranty. We do not have a warranty on this vehicle, so we are definitely free to do whatever we please. All right, our second disclaimer, and probably the most important one here, when it comes to doing RC modifications and things of that nature, whenever you decide to work on your RC vehicle or modify your vehicle, customize your vehicle, you are taking that responsibility into your own hands. Your vehicle, your responsibility. If you happen to mess up somewhere down the line and break something or damage something, that is your responsibility. If you are watching a YouTube video such as this one or somebody else's video, and you see somebody doing modifications to their vehicle, and you decide to copy them, and you mess up somewhere down the line, that is your responsibility, not the person who's doing the video's responsibility. That is your fault, your responsibility, your vehicle, your hands working on the vehicle. You mess up, it's your fault. That's the end of the story on that one. This vehicle belongs to my brother. If I happen to mess up anywhere down the road here on working on this vehicle and break something or damage something, that's my fault. That's my responsibility. And I'm either going to have to A, repair the damage, or B, buy him an entire new vehicle. So just throwing that out there. When it comes to modifying your vehicles, doing any kind of work on your vehicles, if you mess up anywhere down the line, that is your responsibility. All right, now that we got that out of the way, we can start working on our vehicle. The first thing that we're going to do is peel the tracks off of the vehicle, and then we're going to remove this lower track carriage plate down here. That way we can get access to the bottom of this for adding extra weight. And then we're going to start removing the screws on the lower portion of the main chassis plate here. That way we can remove the cab and the body off of the chassis plate. And that's going to require turning your vehicle on. So you're going to need to power up your vehicle, turn it on, flip it over upside down, set it in your lap, and start rotating this track carriage. That way you can gain access to all 7 of the screws that are holding the body onto the chassis plate. And you're going to have to rotate that track carriage a couple times to gain access to all of the screws. Alright, let's get started. We are going to start by removing the tracks off of the track carriage. Now we have our drive cogs right up here on the front. That's the part that's driving the track forward and backwards and left and right and whatnot. We're going to start removing the track at the back by the rear idler wheel, right back here. This is going to be our starting point. Now I'm going to start at the top of the track back here on the back side, and I'm going to apply even pressure and lift up on it, like this, and kind of work my way around with my fingers. That way we can shift it off of that drive cog, or that idler wheel, sorry, idler wheel, not drive cog. Making sure that we're not getting snagged on our other idler wheels or bogey wheels. And just like that, we've got the track off. Piece of cake. Moving around to the other side, once again, starting from the idler wheel, not the drive cog. Depending on which way you have your track facing, it might be sitting on the front and not on the back. But make sure that you start on the idler wheel. Once again, reason for doing that is that there's less stuff to damage back here. On our drive cog, we could possibly do some damage. We might break some internal gears on the inside of the drive unit itself. So don't start on the drive unit. Start on the idler wheel at the back. Once again, starting at the very back of the track, putting pressure on the back of the track, using my left hand here, so this is not as easy on camera, and just kind of working my way around. There we go, and we got that guy removed. So piece of cake on removing the tracks. Got those guys off to the side. The next thing that we're going to do is start removing the 10 screws that are holding this plate on the bottom of our track carriage. So we've got 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we'll remove those 10 screws. When you do that process, keep an eye on these little idler wheels down here. They will most likely fall out. I recommend putting those off to the side and setting them in the same tray that you're putting all your screws in. After that, we're going to start removing the 7 screws on the main chassis plate that are holding the body on. And that's going to require turning your excavator on, once again, flipping it over upside down in your lap. That way you can rotate the track carriage as you gain access to all 7 of those screws. So I'm going to do this off camera, boys and girls. I'm going to remove this bottom plate on the bottom of our track carriage and start pulling out our 7 screws on the bottom of the main chassis plate that are holding the body on. We'll get all that stuff separated and removed, and we'll catch up after that. Alright, so I just removed our lower plate here off of the track carriage. It's pretty filthy. It has some oil and sand and bits of debris stuck to it. Our idler wheels are sitting inside the track carriage itself, so I'm going to go ahead here and pull our idler wheels out and put them off to the side. That way we don't lose them. And apparently there's a counterweight on the inside as well. So that just fell out of the vehicle. 2 steel bars right here that are kind of stuck together with some padded double-sided tape. Looking at the inside of the track carriage, it is completely filthy, so we're going to have to take a rag and wipe the track drive units off and get all that dirt and debris off of there. You can expect to see that. These guys leak oil, so, you know, dirt's attracted to oil, and you can expect to see that for the most part. Looking at the inside of the track carriage, you can see our grooves, these little plastic grooves that hold the weights in place. So our weights sit in just like so, with the foam padding facing that outer track plate. So keep that in mind, the way they have everything positioned in here. And we're going to also add some extra weight to the inside of the track carriage. We're going to hot glue in some nuts and bolts and things of that nature just to kind of bolster this up back here, just to give it a little bit more of a footprint on the ground. Alright, so I'm going to take a rag, wipe all this stuff off, get it nice and clean, wipe off that chassis plate, get that nice and clean, put everything off to the side that needs to be put off to the side, and start removing our screws once again from the main chassis plate down here. Continuing on here, we have all 7 of the screws removed from the lower chassis plate here, so we can remove the back portion of the body. I took the battery out of the vehicle, put that on the charger, put the battery cover back in place. One thing I did before removing the battery was extending the secondary boom out. Not all the way, but pretty far. We have about a ½ inch of clearance up here on our worm gear screw servo. What I wanted to do was free up both of the limiters, making sure that neither one of the limiters is coming into contact with that secondary boom arm. Once again, I'm going to try to relocate this lower limiter to a lower position. So making sure I'm pushing on the upper limiter right now with my pinky. So that is freed up. It's not touching our secondary boom. Same thing with our lower limiter, making sure it's not touching the secondary boom. If I can put this into position, try to give you guys a view on what that limiter looks like. Right there is our lower limiter, that little button sticking up. Boop, boop, boop. That guy right there. That is a button. You can push in on it. That is a limiter switch, which stops your secondary boom from traveling in. Once again, we're going to try to relocate that limiter switch to a lower position. That way we can get our secondary boom to retract a little bit further, closer to the chassis. All right, one thing that happened here, talking about taking responsibility for your own projects. This is my brother's excavator once again. When I was in the process of removing these screws, I had this sitting upside down on my lap, and I put a little bit too much pressure down on the chassis with the screwdriver, and I broke this handle back here. So right back here, I broke this handle off the chassis. So that is my responsibility once again, and I'm going to have to fix that. So I'm going to need a little bit of glue to try to reattach this handle back onto the chassis, or back onto the body. So taking responsibility for your own actions. There we go. Sorry, Ian. You know, accidents happen, man. I'm sorry. So getting ready to remove this chassis cover. There is some weight in here. I can feel that. I'm going to go ahead and take the battery cover back off of the body. Just in case we need to feed our battery cable out in some way, shape, or form. Gently removing this, seeing what we got going on in here. We're definitely has some weight on the inside. Looking at where our battery cable is attached into the circuit board or the main motherboard, and I'm going to go ahead and just unplug that. There we go. Looking at the inside of the chassis or body itself here, the rear portion of the body, we can see that there is some steel weights in here already being held in with this plastic plate. See the steel bar right there. And we're also going to come in with some 1/2-inch nuts and bolts and some hot glue and just bulking this whole inside up with nuts and bolts and hot glue and whatnot. Making sure that we don't go overboard. We want to leave enough room that we can reattach this back onto the excavator without getting in the way of any of the stuff on the inside of the excavator. Taking a peek at our motherboard, right here is where the battery gets plugged into, the positive and negative posts, so remember where that goes. There is our speaker. There is our on-off switch. There is our stock slewing servo, and this is the servo or motor for raising and lowering your main boom. That is done via a half-moon shaped gear that is attached to the main boom, and then there's a worm gear on the bottom on the inside here. So down on the inside of this portion there is a worm gear that is turning like a screw and allowing your main arm to travel up and down. Pretty strong setup in all reality. Next thing we need to do is remove the cab, and I believe it's just a matter of removing this one Phillips screw right down here. So we'll get that guy out of the way right now and see if there's anything else entitled in removing the cab. So far, all of these screws have been the same size. All the screws from the track carriage, lower portion of the chassis there, all the same size. So I'm just setting those off into a magnetic tool tray. Body kind of lifts up and off, or the cab lifts up and off of the vehicle. There's a look at our cab. Getting ready to remove the driver's seat from the inside of the chassis here. We have our little LED light going to the center of the driver's seat up by our forward reverse sticks there. We need to follow this wire back and see where it's going into the motherboard. That way we can unplug it and get this out of the way. So I'm tracing the wires back, and they go all the way back around to this plug right out here, this little white plug on the outside of the board, this guy right here. So we're going to gently unplug this plug. Making sure not to pull on the wires themselves. Fish this wire out of here. And there we go. We have the seat removed. And we can set that off to the side. Taking a look at the motherboard, we're going to have to unplug a lot of these wires just for the stuff that we're doing on the vehicle. So we have to pay attention to where all the wires are going. Thankfully, a lot of stuff was color-coded, so not too many worries on that. Other stuff is marked. Our battery, for instance, is a white two-way plug, and it has a little shape of a battery down here on the board, and then a positive and a negative, so we know that goes out to the battery. Our second white two-way plug over here says LED on it. So we know that goes to the blue flashing LED light that is in the cab itself. So LED and our battery. Everything else is kind of self-explanatory. We have a white four-way, a green four-way, a blue four-way, a yellow two-way sitting in behind here, and a red two-way next to that. another white 4-way, and a red 4-way. All the wires going out to our main boom, this red 4-way, the white 4-way, the blue 4-way, and the green 4-way all go out to the main boom. So that's all connected right here. So really not much confusion there. These guys are side by side. We know where they're going. Quick mental note here, as you're removing these wires from the circuit board, sometimes that lower socket might try to lift off of the board. So you need to keep a fingernail on that socket when you're lifting the wire out of there, just so you don't pull that whole section right off and just expose the bare pins. So you need to kind of put your fingernail down on the bottom portion there, and then on either side of the plug there's two little plastic tabs that you can kind of get your other fingernails on and lift that out. Easier said than done sometimes. There we go, we got that disconnected. So there are our 4 wires leading out to the main boom. We have those separated and out of the way. Now, separating the main boom, there's a pin right here that we can drive out and lift this whole unit right up off of here. We should be able to. Coming in on the driver's side here of the cockpit, and kind of try to gently, yep, there we go, start pushing that through. I got it partially inserted, and our pin is partially exposed on the other side. So with the screwdriver held in place, holding the main arm on, I'm removing the rest of the pin, just like that. So there is our pin. Putting that inside the magnetic tool tray. I'm going to remove the screwdriver from the other side. There we go. And there is our main arm disconnected. And once again, our fake cylinders down here should just slide right out, just like that. And there is our main boom disconnected. And a good look at that gear on the bottom, which raises and lowers the main boom. Setting that off to the side. While we have that off, we can see that worm gear on the inside of the lower main boom, which is right there. And that gear spinning is what raises and lowers your main boom. So there you go on that nonsense. Came back in here with some hot glue just to bolster up the chassis, and laid in some lines of hot glue to, well, you know, make things a little bit stronger. Added a few bolts for extra weight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this back corner, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 bolts all together in here, just to give it a little bit of extra weight. I know that's not too much, but once again, I don't really want to overload our slewing servo. I did go back into the chassis itself, the body, and added more weight in here as well. So, talk about not overloading the slewing servo. We have extra weight inside the body of the vehicle as well. So, more nuts glued in down here, hot glued in, or bolts I should say, more bolts glued in over here, bolts glued in down on the corner. Nuts glued in on this side. You can't see them, but they're underneath that hot glue. Filled the whole back cavity under here with hot glue. Remove these weights and put a couple of 4 bolts down below the weights. Hot glued those in place, put the weights back in position, and then filled this whole lower cavity with hot glue. Yeah, it's just like a dead blow back there. Nothing but glue between the body and everything else back here. So, yeah, we added a little bit of weight to this. It weighs a couple pounds right now. Don't necessarily want to add any more. Don't want to overload the machine. Track carriage. I've got the track carriage back together for the most part. I did come back into here and glued in a bunch of nuts and bolts and things of that nature inside the track carriage. Stayed away from the track drive units. I didn't want to block those off just in case we need to change those out in the future. I didn't want to have to dig out any hot glue to get access to them. So all the nuts and bolts and weight that I added is back in here in the center part of the carriage, along with from right where my finger is back. So from like here back, I added weight to try to make it a little bit heavier on the back side. Next step is going to be working on our main boom and secondary boom. Trying to relocate our lower limiter switch here for our secondary boom. We want the secondary boom to curl in a little bit further. So I'm probably going to have to come in here and grind out some plastic, and we're going to try to relocate that limiter switch to a lower position if we can. We might have to make our own mount for that. Another thing I would like to do is see if we can get more lift out of our main boom. Maybe remove some of this plastic so we can get a little bit more lift out of it. So far, the only reason that I'm seeing for this plastic is just a stopper for the main arm or the main boom, just to stop it when it's coming up. All right, time to start separating the main boom. We have several screws to remove. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. The 8th screw there is the last screw. That's what's holding our secondary boom in place. We're not going to take apart our secondary boom. We're just going to try to work around that and have that dangling off to the side. These little guys here are false cylinders. We don't need to remove these screws, but I'm going to remove them anyways just to get them out of the way. Goal is to try to get a little bit more movement out of this half moon shaped gear back here. Probably cut away this plastic tab. Probably remove a little bit of plastic back here. We'll see once we get into that. As well as relocating our lower limiter switch down here. We'll have to remove some plastic in here, I'm sure, and try to see if we can find a new location for that limiter switch. Might need to make a new mount for that as well. Alright, so I'm going to pause the camera, start pulling some screws here on our main boom, and we'll see where we're at after that. So we got the arm split here at the moment. Looking at a little half moon shaped gear here. I marked a little T on the top of the gear to mark it for top. That way when I can pull this thing out of here and know which way it goes in. I just had this gear out a second ago. It may be difficult to do one handed, but there we go. So we'll come in here and just remove some of this plastic, grind it back a little bit, and see if we can get a little bit more lift out of it all around. So a little bit difficult to separate, a whole bunch of stuff going on inside here. I don't want to pull this whole darn thing apart. Looking at the very front where our limiter switch is, I removed the limiter switch, which is right here. This guy. It was sitting down in a little groove right here and coming out the front. So I stuck a little screwdriver in the side of it and kind of lifted it up and pried it out of there. So yeah, that just kind of fits down in this groove and sticks out the front. I took a little plastic plunger off the top of it, put it on my grinder, and just ground some material off the back half of it, and then ground a little bit of material off the front half of it. Alright, so that way we'll be able to push it in a little bit further before it actually starts to actuate the limiter switch. That little chunk on the inside is supposed to be in there. That's what is depressing the actual switch. This part right up here. I was talking about relocating that switch to a different position. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that or not. Just because of how everything's laid out on the inside of here. We could probably cut out some plastic. Spider crawling on my hand. We could probably cut out some plastic and run it out this way out the front if we wanted to, or if we could. But that might put us in the wrong spot. So I'm not too sure what I want to do in here after looking at everything. Get this switch out of the way. We can see our upper limiter switch right there. You could cut some of this back a little bit further, right in here. Take it back to this nub, and we'd be able to go a little bit further back with everything. But trimming off the edge of the little button, this guy right here, after trimming that button down, it has to depress further to actuate the switch. So I think we'll be alright just like that. I'm going to come in here right now and put this thing on the grinding wheel and try to grind off a little bit of material and see what it's looking like after that. So I'm going to bring this baby over to the grinder. I'm going to slap it back together, push both halves of the arm back together, and put it on the grinding wheel and try to trim this down a little bit and see what it's looking like. Well, lots of grinding later, and there's absolutely no wonder in my mind whatsoever at this point in time why nobody has done this on video as of yet. Alright, so looking at the bottom of the arm, over here on the driver's side of the arm, the left side of the arm, this portion was sticking down quite a bit, like right down to here. And this side over here, which is another ridge altogether, separate ridge altogether, was sitting up a little bit higher than this side over here. So I basically ground this whole thing down to this level right there. Trying to bring all this stuff here, this part, and this part back to that level right there. Yeah, it's not exactly straight, you know. I'm using I was using a big grinding wheel and a hand file, but whatever. If you guys go ahead and do it on your own, then you know, if you get it straighter than I do, then I guess you're better than I am. So that's what the end result on this one. Getting into the arm right there, starting to get into the plastic of the arm, getting past our safe point more or less. All right, spinning the arm around, still attached to our secondary boom. It's kind of cool. Side note here, they actually have the wires for the secondary boom running through these fake hydraulic hoses. That's kind of neat. But here we go. Looking at our secondary boom, where our lower limiter switch is. So I came in there and ground away quite a bit. A lot of that was done on the grinding wheel, and then I came in with a hand file afterwards and just tried to square things up a little bit more. But that is the end result on that. I'm afraid if we go too much further than this, that we're going to go right through the bottom of the arm, and we don't want that. So I'm going to slap it back together like this. Our limiter switch has been trimmed, at least that end button has been trimmed down a little bit. And yeah, we'll slap it all back together and see if we get any more reach out of it or any more curl in out of the whole deal. Hopefully by the time we're done, we'll be able to load up a Huina 1582 or a legendary tipper dump truck on flat ground. That'd be nice. Alright, let's pause the camera, slap it back together, and see what she's looking like. Got it all back together, but I'm not too sure. It's definitely coming in further. The arm is. Before it hits that safety switch that did previous. But nowhere near like I've seen in other people's videos where they've got the bucket like all the way up to the main boom. That's pretty extreme. And I'd like to be able to get it back that far, or at least a little bit further back than what we have it currently. Trying to get it where you guys can see what's happening and give myself room to work at the same time. So we're definitely hitting the safety switch. Safety switch is still working. Our limiter switch. But not as much curl as I was thinking that we're going to get out of it. We really need to do some drastic grinding in here. Drastic grinding to get this to come back further. So right there is where we're sitting at right now, with this secondary boom pulled all the way in. If we could get this to raise all the way up, it's going to be something like that. It's still holding a good bucket load of dirt. It's not going to be spilling too much. But it's not like I've seen in other people's videos online where they got this arm so far back that it's actually making contact with the main boom. That's pretty extreme. And yeah, I think I might take this apart one more time and take a peek on the inside and see how much plastic we've got to work with to see if I can grind more material out of there. I might end up grinding some more material out of there. Back apart again. Looking at our meso wires and a whole bunch of stuff in here, man. I got all kinds of stuff jammed in this thing. That's what she said. Yeah, looking at the front of the main arm here. See, I got that ground down pretty thin. And we really can't grind that down anymore. Now, the only thing I can figure out with the other people who are getting some serious curl out of their buckets or curl out of that secondary boom, they've got to be just grinding right on through that plastic and then relocating that limiter switch somewhere else. But they definitely aren't showing their secrets, I can tell you that. So right at the moment, where we have it right now, like I said, we got that ground down pretty darn thin. The button still works once again. It's fully pressed in, is bottomed out. So it's our button isn't dropping down any lower than the main arm. So when the arm comes in and touches it, it's going to compress it all the way, which is what we want. But I don't think it's safe to take this down any further. If we do, we're really going to drastically weaken our main boom. And we don't want that. We don't want to be breaking main booms or anything like that. I've already done that before on my 1550. So I think right now we're just going to leave it right where it's at. If we look in here, we see this little board right there. We flip this arm upside down, or around. And we can see the other one over here on this side. Right there. Those are magnetic triggered limiters, apparently, from what I'm guessing. So it's just a matter of figuring out which one is up and which one is down. So I need to take a peek at this real quick and see if I can discover which one is forward and which one is backwards, or which one is up and which one is down. Prying the arm up here, I'm looking at all our bundle of wires. You see that yellow plug up there in the top left corner with the 2 white wires and a red wire, and then that black plug below it with the 2 white wires and red wire. Those are both the limiter switches that we're looking at. The yellow one is for this one up here, which is on the right side of the arm. So the black one is going to be for this one down here on the left side of the arm. So I'm thinking about just unplugging one of those and then hooking it back up and seeing which one is affected. Trial and error. So I'm going to unplug that yellow one first. So saying that, it's probably going to be the black one that we need to unhook. But I'm going to unplug the yellow one first. I'll put the arm back on and see what happens there. Alright, we got the arm back together. Gonna slap it on here and see how everything runs. Got a little pin. Put back through. Alright, so that's hooked up. Matter of getting all our wires plugged back in. Green to green, blue to blue, blah blah blah. Camera flash is right in the eyes. Making it difficult to see. Alright, we got a green one plugged in. Moving on to Mr. Blue. Mr. Blue's plugged in. Going over to Mr. White. He's in the groove. And on to Red Man. Alright, we got them all hooked up. So I've got it all plugged back in again. I only have 2 screws in the boom. One here, one here. And that's it. The rest of the screws are still removed. We unplugged the yellow wire in there. Let's see if we can get, if that's the right one or not. Yep, sure was. There we go. We got to travel all the way up. That bucket is way high in the air. Way high in the air. Let's grab a dump truck, one of the Huina tippers or the legendary tipper, and see if we can reach it. Huina 1582, and we have more than enough reach. More than enough reach right now to get into the back of that truck. That is awesome. On flat ground. That is all that we're looking for right there. Bonus. Big time bonus. Only problem is though, right now, we've got that limiter completely unplugged. So unless we just keep an eye on it when we're running this machine and just stop it when it gets up to the top, we'd be all right. I think we're better off to try to relocate that limiter switch, that magnetic triggered switch, or possibly relocating the magnet for that switch. That switch was over here on the right hand side of the boom, so that's being triggered by the magnet over here on the right hand side of the boom, opposite of this magnet here. This one over here is what's triggering that one. So either A, we relocate the magnet to a different location, or B, we relocate the switch. It'd probably be easier just to relocate the magnet. It's either that or just bring it up slowly and leave that thing unplugged altogether. As long as we bring it up slowly, we're going to be okay, but if we accidentally hit the button on the controller while we're trying to do something else, accidentally pull down on that thing, could be catastrophe. So I think we're better off relocating that magnet. Alright, so we've got the arm split. We're looking at that little limiter board there. We could do two things. We could try to move that board one way or the other and see how it affects things. Or we can try to relocate the magnet. Magnet being on the right hand side of the machine. We're looking at the left hand side. I think the easiest thing to do, and probably the most accurate thing, less trial and error, would be to relocate the magnet. So we'll go ahead here and plug this board back in. That yellow plug, we'll get that yellow plug plugged back in, get this thing all put back together, pop out that magnet, and see if we can relocate it to a different position, and go from there. And there we go, the magnet has been removed. And that was, well, it came out easier than I thought it would, put it that way. I started with a small pick. I was just kind of picking around the edge of the magnet, between the magnet and the plastic, trying to just wiggle it out a little bit. It wasn't budging. I went to a small pair of pliers and just started kind of squeezing on this at different angles to try to crack the glue loose a little bit. And that didn't seem to be working. So I grabbed a pair of wire cutters, and a pair of bullnose cutters, and was getting ready to cut this right off of the surface of our mount. And I didn't necessarily want to do that. I don't want to weaken this in any way, shape, or form. I kind of want to get that out of there in one piece without doing any damage to the mount itself. And when I was going over there to cut it off with the wire cutters, I got to like right here, and magnet came out and stuck to the back of the wire cutters. So yeah, not as difficult as I thought it was going to be. We've got the arm all put back together, so we're going to go ahead here, slap the arm back on it, start raising it up, get it all the way up to that up position, and then mess with this magnet and see if we can find a good spot to mount it so we can work that kill switch. Alright, we've got a test battery hooked back up. This is a huge trial and error moment. Depending on how much you trim the plastic back on that main boom there, it's going to depend on where that magnet needs to go. So this is going to vary from vehicle to vehicle and person to person. Whole bunch of trial and error to find the right location for the magnet. We're not going to have a limiter right now going up. We'll grab that magnet and see if we can figure out what's going on here. Alright, so I got it in a position right now, holding it right here with the tip of my thumb. Very important mental note here. When you're trying to find the perfect location for that magnet and you're moving the arm up and down and you're moving the magnet all around trying to find the perfect spot for it, use something non-metallic to hold the magnet in place, such as your hand or anything non-magnetic. You don't want anything to interfere with that sensor. You might have held in place with a pair of pliers. You get it glued in place, you got it in the perfect spot. and then you go to try it out afterwards and you find out that it's traveling too far just because the metal from the pair of pliers was affecting the strength of the magnet and affecting the limiter sensor. So use your hand or something non-metallic when you're trying to find that perfect location for the magnet. All right, well, I had the magnet on here and it seemed like it was traveling too far and then not far enough and then too far and not far enough, and sometimes it was just right. Problem being is that our sensor is permanently mounted on the inside of this arm, right? And it's following a set arc pathway here. And this little spot right here is lined up perfectly where that's, within that pathway. So having it over here on the side was just too far away from that sensor. So it was varying. Sometimes it would go too far and sometimes it wasn't far enough. Sometimes it was just right. So I think what we need to do is take a sander, grind this little edge off here, get this back down to flat material, and draw like an imaginary arc through here following the shape of our bottom of our boom and that gear there. So we just draw like a little arc right through here following that shape and try to stay on that line with the magnet and see if we can reposition it. Alright, so I think we got it where it needs to be, which is sitting slightly forward from its stock position. What I did is I took a scratch awl or a pick and I drew a line through the original circle following the arc of this gear right here at the bottom of the main boom. And then I followed that arc all the way up on either side, made a scratch in the plastic on either side. So we had a general idea where center was for our sensor back there. And then I used a drum sander, like a little mini sanding drum, and a grinding wheel, stone grinder, on my drill, and just ground that piece of plastic down until it was smooth. And then it's kind of held this into position, the magnet, moved the joystick for bucket control up and down until I found the sweet spot, put a dab of hot glue on it to hold it in place, waited for that to dry, tried it again to make sure it was still in the right spot, laid it over sideways and just belted it with hot glue and just filled this entire cavity with hot glue. Just to kind of bolster things up a little bit and guarantee that that guy is not going to fall out. So let's take a peek at it and see what we're looking at here with our overall travel and whatnot, and our stopping distance, which is what we're looking for. So we're getting it all the way up in the air, just to the point of dead ending, and not to the point of overextending, which is perfect. Perfect location right there. It's like right on the verge of starting to overextend, but not quite there yet. So perfect location right there with that magnet. Once again, this is going to be like a little touch and go operation. You're going to have to mess around with it and until you get it right. It's absolutely key to get that one line going through the middle of its stock location. So just try to imagine the arc here of this gear in the background and where it's traveling at, and then draw a straight, well, not a straight line, but draw a line through the middle of the original little location there, following that arc, and then bring that line all the way up to the top following the arc on both directions, just so you know you have a reference point of where it needs to be center with the sensor. So, and then after that, it's just a matter of holding it in place with one finger. You don't want to use anything metal to hold it in place because that might affect it overall, because the whatever object you're using to hold it may be taking away from the magnet's strength, and that could affect it after you finish. So you got to kind of hold it with your finger in place, and then I just put a dab of hot glue on it after I knew where its location was. So I just held it with one finger, moved the arm up and down until we found our sweet spot. Did it a few times to make sure that it was still in the right spot, and then I grabbed the hot glue gun and just put a little dab of glue on it just to kind of hold it in place. Waited for that to dry, tried it a couple more times to make sure that it was still in the right spot. It was good. Laid it over sideways and then just filled this whole cavity with hot glue just to guarantee that it wasn't going to come out of there. So in all reality, that's a pretty easy mod to do right there. Just a matter of taking your chassis off of the vehicle, taking the cab off, pulling the pin out, you know, unplugging your wires going to the main boom, and then grinding or filing away that extra bit of plastic that hangs off this bridge right up here and bringing it back. One of these actually hangs down further than the other one. Bringing it back to the one that hangs down the least. So I think it's this side right here that hangs down farther. So I just kind of ground this side back so it's the same height as the lip on the far side over yonder there, which is this very far edge. So if you're looking at it, we got our main ridge up on top, this side over here, and then this side over here by the cab. This side over here by the cab was, I didn't have to take any material off it basically. This side over here hung down quite a bit. So you can see how this plastic is untouched up here and how this plastic is ground away. So I ground away basically on this side, removed that little plastic tang that was hanging down by the gear, and then ground all the way up basically flush with the other side right there. And then it's just a matter of coming in and removing the magnet from a stock location, drawing a line once again, following the curve, drawing a line through the center of it and right on up to the edges, and then grinding down that chunk of plastic that's there, repositioning your magnet, moving it up and down as you go. Try it a couple times and make sure that you find the right location for it, then re-gluing it back into place, and double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking to make sure that it's good and right before you get it all glued into place. But all in all, that's a pretty easy mod to do. You get some extra lift out of that main boom. So we should have no problem loading up the Huina 1582 or the legendary tipper truck on flat ground, that is for sure. I think we can get a couple inches above that right now. I was actually building my WPL B16 in the background, turning this guy into a tipper truck over the last few days just because we were unable to load the Huina dump trucks and the legendary dump truck on flat ground. We do a lot of work out on the adventure course with these guys, and we're always loading from flat ground, so definitely need to be able to reach into the back of the truck. Loading from a pad just isn't an option. So let's get this guy all put back together, grab a tape measure, and see what we're looking at here for our overall height. Alright, we've got our vehicle all back together. We added extra weight into the bottom of the track carriage back here by the idler wheel in the center a little bit, as well as putting extra weight, nuts and bolts and things inside the main chassis plate and the rear portion of the body itself. Let's go ahead here and put the tracks back on it. I want to get that part done on camera, that way you guys can see what's going on. Doesn't matter what direction you put these tracks on here in, they are multi-directional. What does matter is where you start. This time, when we removed the tracks, we started at the back. By the idler wheel. And this time we're going to be installing the tracks from the front back. So we're going to start on the main drive cog and work our way back to the idler wheel on the very back of the vehicle. The reason we want to do that is so we put the least amount of stress on this main drive cog as possible and drive unit. I'm putting the track on. I'm making sure that it's engaged all the way with all the teeth on the cog, just like that. And then we're just going to kind of work out that slack towards the back of the vehicle. I'm going to pull up on this back corner back here and see if I can get it started on the bottom, just like that, on the bottom of the idler wheel, and then putting pressure all the way around it and trying to get it to line back up. Now, our rear idler wheel, the teeth aren't lined up with the track just yet. I should have paid better attention to that when I was putting it together, but if this happens to you, put your finger back here behind the idler wheel on one of these little teeth back here. Just kind of hold it solid. Take a little bit of pressure off that track and just give it a little spin and it'll click into place. There we go. We got one track installed. Piece of cake. Definitely easier taking them off, but not too bad. Alright, once again, now we're back over here on the passenger side of the vehicle, starting at the front on the main drive cog itself, working our way towards the back. Making sure that the track is lined up in the drive cog. All the teeth are lined up properly. Might be easier doing it this way for you. Who knows? I'm putting a little bit of pressure back here with my thumb to get this thing started on that idler wheel. Easier said than done sometimes. It takes two hands, that is for sure. A lot easier when you're not doing it on camera. Once again, we're not quite lined up with the track back here. There we go. We got it in place. All set. Both tracks are on. Alright, we got her all slapped back together again. Got a tape measure out here, fishing scale out here, curious to see how much it weighs. Let's fire it up and see what kind of height we're getting out of it. I don't know if we can notice or not on camera. No, I guess we can't. I went back in after the fact and removed our red and blue flashing LED light and painted it orange with an orange neon Sharpie just to kind of tone down those red and blue tones on our flashing light. Alright, let's see what kind of height we're getting out of this guy. I think in the beginning we were getting up to about here, possibly, maybe a little bit higher. I should have measured it beforehand, and I didn't do that. I did do a measurement initially when I first did an unboxing on this video, so I guess we can refer back to that. Wow, look at that. She is way up in the air. I can tell right now that we should have no problem loading up that tipper truck while sitting on flat ground. That is for sure. We're definitely above the box there. No problems whatsoever. Should be a piece of cake loading up the tipper truck now while sitting on level ground. Plenty of clearance. Wow, we might even be able to clear the cab with that. I'm not sure. Yep, we can clear the cab. I can just barely get my pinky in here between the bucket and the cab. So that's pretty darn cool. Not only can we make it into the back of the bed of the truck, we can actually clear the cab if we need to. So that is a huge improvement overall right there. Alright, let's get a quick measurement on it and see how much height we're actually getting out of this. We have our secondary arm curled all the way in. Bucket curled all the way in. And it looks like we're sitting at 7.5 inches to the bottom of the bucket. 7.5 inches even to the bottom of the bucket. That's not too bad. Once again, I can't remember what it was initially. We'll have to refer to my unboxing video to see where it was sitting at, but I want to say it was right around 6.5 inches, somewhere in that area. So we gained a little bit of lift, that is for darn sure. Way up in the air there. Camera level if we can. Alright, the camera's sitting level. Let's get a measurement on that. Alright, from the tabletop, which is level, to the bottom of the middle tooth on the bucket. And I believe that middle tooth is the one that's sitting down the lowest. We are 19 1/8 of an inch. 19 1/8. That's pretty darn good. That is mighty high. Well, we really don't need all that much height out of it, but it definitely makes it easier if you're scraping down the face of a hillside. We can get that bucket up there quite a ways. Alright, looking at our secondary arm and how much travel we gained out of that guy. Now, I should have measured this to begin with, and I didn't do that once again. I was forgetful on that. I should have measured in between our bucket and the chassis on the vehicle just to get a baseline measurement. But I think, I want to say, it was right around here somewhere is where it was sitting. Not too sure, but I think it was right around here somewhere. And now we're coming into here. So we got a little bit more movement out of it, but not much. I would like to get a little bit more movement out of it, but I just can't do that. We're getting pretty close to grinding right on through the plastic on the main boom, and I don't want to compromise the structural integrity of this main boom. I did some serious compromising on the main boom for my 1550 and suffered some serious repercussions, as well as not running any limiters on my 1550. But I broke the ears off the main boom right up here that connects our secondary boom, as well as cracking the main boom in half. So I don't want to do any sacrificing to the structural integrity of this main boom. Once again, I think it was sitting right about there in the beginning, somewhere in that area. And now we're getting into there. So not too bad. Taking a look at the secondary boom in that area that we worked on. We were working right in this area here. Now, I don't know if we can pick it up on camera or not, but right in front of my fingernail there is a very small hole right here. And that is where we're getting extremely close to grinding right through our main boom down here. So plastic is very thin in this area. We have enough plastic to keep our limiter switch in place and enough plastic to, well, maintain our structural integrity for the most part. Now, the little button here on top of our limiter switch, once again, I did remove that button off of the limiter switch. I ground material off the top of the button as well as off the bottom of the button to make that as thin as possible. So now when that button is fully depressed, it sits level with the main boom. And that's about as close as we can get it. Once again, I don't want to grind any more material out of here, and I don't want to start grinding on the secondary boom over here. So I think that's about as good as we can get it for the moment. Alright, let's throw it on a fishing scale and see how much she's weighing in at. Alright, fishing scale in hand. Gotta find a nice spot on the excavator to hook this up to where we're not going to damage anything. Put it onto the bucket linkage right now. Let's see if we can get it in a view where we can see it on camera. Let me see here. Can you see it on camera? Yes, we can. Alright, it looks like we are sitting at 10 pounds even. 10 pounds. 4.5 kilograms and or 10 pounds. Not too bad. Once again, I believe from my unboxing video, I recall that it weighed right around 6 pounds from the factory. So we gained roughly 4 pounds on the vehicle. That's not too bad. Hopefully we'll be able to handle that larger yellow grading bucket with that extra weight on the vehicle. And that is pretty much going to do it, everyone. I would call that a success. We definitely gained enough height to clear the tipper truck. We can not only get into the bed of the truck, but we can actually clear the cab if we wanted to do that. We gained a little bit of extra inward travel out of our secondary boom. Not as much as I would like, but we gained a little bit more, so that's all right. And the vehicle has definitely gained some more weight. So that is going to do it. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. As always, questions and comments are always welcome. And we will see you all on the next video. Thanks again.